I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is May 24th, 2023 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice we're starting early this evening at 5:30. Item number 1 was to call the meeting to order. Item number 2 is seat an alternate. Have Mr. Carbone with us this evening. Item number 3 is hearing of residents. Anybody sign up? I didn't see anything. Nobody. No emails or anything to read? All righty, moving right along. Item number 4. We have 2 workshops this evening. The first is the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee meeting number 1. The reason we started a little early this evening. Who's gonna start this?
All right, good afternoon. So my name is Shad Como. I'm a principal and vice president at Friesen Nichols. Also have with me this evening Caroline Stewart and Chris Wesley. Had trouble pronouncing his name, but and they're both from our San Antonio office. I am located in our Pearland office, so it's good to be here this evening. We're kicking off the comprehensive plan update. We kicked it off a couple of months ago with a tour of the city, and we looked at the 4 key areas that we'll be discussing and looking at today. And so I'm going to go through a few slides, and when we get toward the end is where I want to have a little bit of interaction and some discussion with you all, kind of pick your brains on some things and some opportunities and challenges that you all may see in these 4 key areas. This is the rest of the team, and so you'll see a combination of us throughout this process. We also have a teaming partner, Catalyst Commercial, who's worked with the city also in the past, Jason Clonch and Blake Parnell, and they're helping us with the economic development portion of this project. Just before I get started, how many of you all, so I don't maybe rehash some things, have been through a comprehensive plan update before? Maybe a couple of you all. And so you'll be familiar with some of these things. But when we talk about planning, a lot of times you get pushed back on planning, but planning is very important. It's one of those things that establishes a blueprint for your community and for your city. It gives you direction. It helps to give you guide. Especially the state that you all are in now. You have a lot of areas that have been developed over time, built out in some areas, landlocked in some areas, can't grow in some directions. But you do have some key areas in the city that are starting to experience this growth and new growth. And so what do we want those areas to look like? And so we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So the plan helps to give you a vision. And when we're talking about the comprehensive plan, it is the reflection of your community's vision. And so you all sure talk with neighbors and friends in the community, and I'm sure they give you feedback on various things in the community and things that they like to see. So it helps to establish that community vision. It's not anything, the comprehensive plan is not a document that's set in stone, but it helps to guide policies. And so when we're going through the process and looking at various land uses, there may be some things that might affect or change a current ordinance that you currently have. And so how do we implement that vision that we're establishing in this process? Sometimes you might have to do that by changing some ordinances or some policies. And it really is a tool for decision making. So when you have developers and various people come to you at the P&Z and they're requesting and their certain developments, you're able to go back and look at the comprehensive plan, in particular that future land use plan, and to see what that guide is, and so you could use that as a decision-making tool. What the comprehensive plan isn't, it isn't legally binding. So where you have a zoning ordinance where you do have those regulations that are binding unless they're changed, the comprehensive plan, like we mentioned, is more of a guide. It isn't a zoning ordinance again, but it does help to influence your zoning in your community. And of course, planners always like to say, we don't want plans that sit on the shelf. We want that to be a tool for you, the comprehensive plan to be a tool for you, something for you to be able to use in your decision making. So we have some highlighted things here. These highlight some of the things that we're going to touch on throughout this process in the scope of this project. So we're going to look at your city growth. We'll look at how have you been growing over the last few years and update some of those demographics. We'll look at some of your policies, broad brush over those and see if it's anything that we need to look at or take a deeper dive into as we go through this process. As I mentioned earlier, we want to establish a vision, a land use vision, an overall vision for your community as we go through. And we're going to focus on 4 key areas that we'll look at a little bit more detail. So we're going to look at your land use, future land use, economic development strategies. Your transportation thoroughfare plan was updated a few years ago, but as we're looking at these key areas and we're looking at some of these future land uses, is it anything that's going to affect or maybe change some of your corridors? Do we have the proper connections in place? And so we'll make sure that thoroughfare plan aligns with what's being developed through this process. And then, of course, we'll be looking at existing conditions. So at the next time that we meet, we'll go through various maps and other analysis that we've been doing in the background to give you a little bit more detail of where you currently stand as a community. So we'll be going through these various things, and at the end of the day, we'll have an implementation plan. That implementation plan might call for some policy changes, some ordinance updates, but most importantly, it'll give you your future land use moving forward. So your role as the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have CPAC typically when we go through this process, the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, we'll call it. So you all are playing that role. But your role is to help guide and steer this process. And so as we're going through, we want you to be a sounding board for us as we're going through these various things and making sure that we're staying on track. We want you to provide guidance for us, helping us to develop this community vision, and then really be champions for the comprehensive plan. As Planning and Zoning Commission, comprehensive plan is very important, and so we want you to be a champion for it. So when we have these different engagement efforts throughout, we want you to be able to spread the word and share with the citizens how important it is for them to give their feedback. We will have a survey in this process, electronic survey that'll be going out. At some point, we'll have a project website as well, and so we want you to promote those various things. This is a snapshot of the proposed timeline that we'll be going through. So we'll be meeting with you 3 other times in this process. We'll have a time where we engage with the community as well to get their input. And so when we engage with the community, because this comprehensive plan process is a little bit more specific because we're focusing in on these key areas, we'll come to the community once we have some preliminary recommendations so we can get their feedback on that information. But in the beginning of the process, as I mentioned, we will have a community survey that they'll be able to give input as well. And so we're looking to wrap up this process toward the end of the year with the adoption meetings for P&Z, recommendation meeting for P&Z, and then the adoption meeting for council in the November-December timeframe. In terms of engagement, as I mentioned, we'll be meeting with you all. We did have a meeting with city staff, and they took us around the city. But we looked at the city as a whole, but we also went to those 4 areas to look at those and to kind of talk about the current developments and things that are currently going on in those areas. I talked about the community engagement event. Also next month in June, probably around the time we meet with you all for the second time, we'll want to have some focus group meetings, stakeholder focus groups, and so we'll work with staff in identifying who are the participants for those meetings. But that's where we'll want to talk to them. It may be developers, maybe landowners, other organizations in the community, but we'll want to sit down with them and to talk to them, get some input from them, and hear what their vision is for the community. So we'll have up to 5 of those focus group meetings next month. Not going to go into any detail on these previous plans and studies, but just want to bring to your attention that you all have been planning in this community for a very long time, and so we think that's very important. So when we look at these previous plans and studies, we don't just throw those out the window. There's at least one thing that you can find in previous plans and studies that is beneficial as you're moving forward and you're planning or updating a particular plan. And so we'll be looking at those and looking at some of those previous recommendations and seeing if there's anything that's important and beneficial that we need to bring forward. Also, in particular, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, there is a portion of the scope where we'll be updating the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and so we're working with staff on the particulars of that scope. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll do any alignment or updating that's necessary for the thoroughfare plan, but we will be looking at previous plans and taking information from that. All right, so I've been talking for a little bit, so I want to kind of give you all the opportunity to speak back to us this evening. Before we dive into those 4 areas, though, but just looking at the community as a whole, what are some of the values and priorities that you see in this community? What are some big issues that you might see? And the issue is not always something that's negative. The issue could be something that's positive as well. And then, what future are you all working towards? So just before we dive in a little bit more, just want to hear from you on some of these questions here we have on the screen. And not everybody at one time.
Well, welcome to P&Z. Commissioners, anyone want to address any?
How you doing, sir? John Carbone. You asked what our values were, and the first thing I wrote down was a close relationship with Randolph. I think for many of us, if Randolph Air Force Base was not here, many of us would not be here ourselves. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing that jumped in my head. And then you said big issues, and I like the way you said it was not so much a negative or a positive, but the first thing that jumped in my head was traffic and traversing Schertz as a whole. I think the biggest issue is southern Schertz and only one thoroughfare, 1518 being the main corridor of traffic. And I think I've been to enough meetings where I've heard 1518. I could use all kinds of adjectives to describe 1518, and none of them are good. And it's what future are we working towards? I think we all know that this place is very popular. Many people want to live in Schertz for many reasons. I think what we want to do is to do it responsibly. I think we see other communities that surround us, and I'm not going to name names, who have done it haphazardly. And I know we don't want that. So answer some of your questions. There you go.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, sir. There we go. Welcome.
Thank you.
Breeze and Nichols is a big company. I expect some good work out of you guys.
No pressure, right?
No pressure. None on my part. Something I've seen in the past is we struggle up here a lot with apartment and multifamily locations. Okay. I'd like a good scrub of the city and to look at where, in your opinion, multifamily and apartments would fit. I can think all but one instance where developers have presented before us. They've tried to put apartment complexes smack in the middle of an established 20, 30-year-old residential neighborhood. And that'll never pass this commissioner. So there's a lot of vacant space, a lot of empty space in Schertz, and maybe picking the best locations or reasonable locations for multifamily and apartments in this area. In the previous comp plan, there was supposed to be a passenger railroad coming through. I don't know if that's dead or not. I think it's dead, but like any big project, all it takes is money and it's going to be back on the books again. Along with that passenger rail on the north side was going to be a new town center. If we don't get a passenger rail, I really don't see a new town center up north. So, you know, what are we going to do up there? There's not much going on up there, so I'd be interested to see what kind of new ideas that might present itself. Someone highlighted before the growth of the mining operations up there, and whether or not we should incorporate that area or leave it ETJ or give up the ETJ. I don't have a good answer or a good idea, but you know, some work and thought on that process as well. Mentioned before, and I'll just repeat. What time of day did y'all do a tour of the city?
It was early afternoon, after lunch.
So it wasn't like 3:30 and 5 and.
We got back that day.
Okay. 3009 and 78 are both state highways. It's getting atrocious out there. It's getting horrible. We need some additional north, south, east, west thoroughfares. And we have a comp plan for transportation, but we seem to wait here on developers building roads. And that's going to take another 20, 25, 30 years. And probably driving down 3009 and the 78 intersection between 4 and 6:30 or 7 o'clock. It takes 6, 7 cycles of the light to get through it. So we need something else. And a headache in this town is that dang railroad track and 78 and the development on the south side of 78. You know, where are we going to go? I don't know. You can't widen it anymore. So I'd like to see ideas on how we can how we can manage traffic better in this area. And also areas that we can protect Randolph Air Force Base. I've been through 3 BRACs when I was in the Air Force, and they're brutal, they're cutthroat, they're nasty. And if anybody wants to change, let's just say what happened to Kelly. If people in high office want to close Kelly Air Base, they can make up a story to close Kelly Air Base. I don't want that to happen next door. So ideas, thought processes on how do we isolate, how do we protect Randolph. That's all I got. Como, you have Louisiana?
My dad, Abbeville.
Oh my God, good man.
One thing before we hear from another commission, I wanted to actually, you mentioned the town center earlier, and we did hear about that, you know, that rail project TOD that was supposed to go. You mentioned the town center not being viable in that area. But do you still see a need for a town center or central location?
Well, it can't be centered around a railroad hub, so that's one thing. The previous one was going to be centered around the railroad hub, which made a lot of sense. But I think we're trying to develop I don't know if I'd call it a town center, but a major community area on the southern section with Homestead and everything else going down there. I suppose there could be something on the north side. But if it would be in the same location and centered around something else, maybe a major thoroughfare, not a railroad,
Right.
maybe a major thoroughfare, yeah, I could see something like that happen.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, real quick, I think in terms of values and priorities, a lot of that, you can see a lot of that in the current comp plan. You know, one of the comments we hear a lot, the feel of Schertz as a small community, as it's, I mean, it's quadrupled in size since I've been. And, but some folks still get the feeling of community. The big issues I think you've heard. Number one is maintaining that relationship with Randolph. That's a big part of what we can do in Southern Schertz. And then the other one is traffic. You know, it's and then I guess a third one would be right now all the commercial retail. I think backtracking, one of the things a lot of people like about Schertz is the separation of the industrial and the large commercial retail from the residential. So that's, you know, when I look at what I call northern Schertz, 78 north, it's pretty, it's on its way. I don't see a lot of issues there. You know, we've got Cibolo Crossing, whatever it's called, there at Cibolo Valley Drive where Santikos is. Now I've got the development right across the street, the other side of Cibolo Valley Drive, which is big commercial retail. But part of the whole traffic issue is the folks down Southern Schertz don't have any of that. So if they want to go to HEB, they have to come up here. But now they can go to Cibolo, but how do they get there? 15, 18. If they want to eat out, they have to come up here. How do they get there? 15, 18. So integrating that commercial retail, I think would be a key issue for Southern Schertz. I have some other thoughts, but they might be better at the end.
Okay. Well,
Anybody else? All right.
all right. So let's kind of talk a little bit more specifically about these areas. So these are the four areas that we'll be taking a deeper dive into. You'll see two of those areas there in the southern portion of Schertz, and then the other two areas that you all have been alluding to in the northern portion of the city. So what I like is to get some input in terms of opportunities or any constraints that you all see in these particular areas. You'll see here a description of these areas as they kind of currently stand. We see area number one. As you just look at the map, you'll see that it has a large ag conservation land use there currently, with a little bit of single-family residential, mostly undeveloped currently, but you have a lot of interest there in that area. And then in terms of the single-family, right now there's the suburban size lots of 6,000 to 10,000 square foot lots there. Of course, it's close to, you know, the interstate, so you'll have definitely have some visibility and attraction that the developers like in this particular area. But as you look at this area, is anything that stands out to you, or what is your vision that you see for this particular area? And I will mention, when we do come back at the next meeting, I've talked about various analysis that we'll go through, but we'll also want to probably sit around the table and pull out some maps and start kind of putting some pen to paper, but for today, we want to just kind of get some thoughts and ideas going.
Well, again, and I've voiced this several times now. I think, how many times have we amended the comp plan down there? 3, 2, something like that. But that comprehensive land use plan was a consensus document. And so I feel, I'm not sure it's this commission's place to tell you our vision. I think what we're hoping for is the end product is what do the people of Schertz want? What's their vision of Schertz? This is all, when you look down here in southern Schertz, so much of it was estate neighborhood and agricultural conservation because that's what the people wanted at the time. Now either they or their heirs are now coming to us and saying, we don't want that. Primarily because the developers are saying, we keep hearing that's not what the market wants. Well, Glenn doesn't care what the market wants. What do the people of Schertz want? We should be driving this ship, not the developers. But honestly, I don't see ag conservation really hanging on out there. I think one of the things is we want a Schertz, we want it to develop, we want it to grow, but we don't want people living on top of each other. And even now, I understand there's legislation floating around that would even remove the lot size restriction, municipal control. So anyway, bottom line is, I will certainly give, when we have the public inputs and stuff, I'll certainly be there to give you my impression, but I really think it's going to be more of what do the people see.
Yeah, and yeah, like mentioned earlier, it's a community vision. So we take your input, we take the input that we have from the community survey, those various engagement meetings, and you'd be surprised. Most times at the end of the day, those visions align for the most part because you all are community members, and I'm sure you all talk in in stores and church and various other settings that you all have in the community, and so we'll definitely tap into all of that input. It's just good for us to kind of hear from you all also, because a lot of developers are approaching you all first before they go to city council and they bring their plans, and so it's good to hear that input. Yes.
Got one thing for this area I've heard multiple times meeting is that area is prone to flooding.
Okay.
So I know many of the individuals who live down there are worried that we do get our rainstorms that we do around here, that we're worried about everything being covered in concrete down there, and eventually being just the concrete jungle, and then all of a sudden we have a tremendous rainstorm and it floods out again like 98. Yeah. So I think maybe some conservation areas in there would help with that runoff when it eventually does become inundated with homes.
Okay. Yeah, another thing that helps, and I think Mr. Outlaw alluded to it, was lot sizes, and so you have varied lot sizes that can help as well.
For the, I had a comment or two. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to take a drive south of Interstate 10 on 1518 and Greytown Road. There's probably 5,000 or 6,000 houses down there. That's county area. I don't know if it's city of San Antonio, it may be, but there's county, and houses are popping up like weeds. We can utilize those rooftops up there to take advantage of any kind of retail space we have available on 10. We have some already. I think it's general business or whatever up there. Maybe look at the concentration of rooftops south of Interstate 10 and give an opportunity for those folks to come across 10 and shop in Schertz rather than going to wherever they're going. I don't know. There's no place to go down there. So there's a good 5,000 or 6,000 houses down there, and they're still growing.
All right, let's look at second area. This is the one near the base that we've been talking about. A lot of large estate neighborhood. We know that that's encouraged around a lot of bases. We worked the city of Corpus Christi, and they had a couple of bases there as well, and it was the same thing. We want to make sure that we're protecting the bases, and so when we did talk to those people that were working there, they were in favor for, you know, either no homes residential around a certain radius around the base, or making sure that there were larger lots that were being developed. And so I think you all have made it clear that this is an important asset to the community, which it is. And so any other thoughts to this area?
Well, again, this is the critical area, I think, for Randolph. And it's certainly a challenge for the city to find acceptable uses to go out there that meet the Air Force criteria. And this is one area where consensus may not work. We'll see what comes up, but this may be something where the city is going to have to step up and tell people what's acceptable out there. You know, I have my own thoughts. The APZ, I think you have the clear zone and APZ1 there in blue, but APZ2 extends almost to the interstate. And but that's not where they do. If any day you go out there and stand, they don't. That's not that's theoretically their approach and departure paths, but very few of them actually fly that path. They come off the runway and, you know, within a quarter, half mile, they're turning left into the traffic pattern, turning left and going out to Seguin. So it's a real. I understand the Air Force's concern because it only takes one. But this is going to be a difficult one.
Yeah. I think this is definitely some representatives. When we talked about those focus groups earlier, definitely a stakeholder representative that we want to talk to in this process.
You might want to touch base with, I don't know whether it's Universal City or San Antonio itself, but if you go out the other side of the base, they're buying up the houses built out there and they're knocking them. So they're creating a crash pad. Well,
Yeah, you really notice that when you drive aviation. You go across the creek and you go into Universal City. As you come up on top of that hill, drive right through, there's nothing. One big clear area.
good for the homeowners.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting place to go watch because, yeah, I think from aviation, 2 or 3 blocks to the north before you see a house, B-38s are coming over those houses at 100 feet on their landing, and of course, when they take off to the north, they're a little bit higher, but still. So again, Randolph is important to this area. As was said, I wouldn't be here either without Randolph. I think it's a big part of not just Schertz, but Live Oak, Universal City, and the whole area.
Right.
This is one we have to be pay close attention.
Okay. All right, let's move to the north. Looking at or focusing on areas 3, we have a 3A and a 3B. And we might need to look at how we might need to change the how we identify those two, but kind of two separate. One's on the north side of the highway. But these was the areas that you all were talking about earlier. Had the one time, you know, rail project that would go through the north side of this area. You see it's, you know, near the quarries and a lot of large estate lots, mainly vacant. And I think somebody mentioned it earlier. The question was, do we want to, entertain this area? Do we want to take on this area? Do we want to have development in this area? So, what are your thoughts about? Let's start with 3A first. We'll take that one first, and then we'll jump down to 3B.
I think 3A lends itself pretty well to warehouses and stuff like that, because we're kind of right in the middle of Austin and San Antonio, and that's kind of what's building out there already. If you look, Amazon's out there, FedEx is out there. So I think that would be a good place for, more of that type of building.
It's really hard to say out here, where you've got 482 running along there just north of the interstate. I think kind of the vision here is between 35 and 482 is M1, M2, commercial type. The area you're talking about, Gordon, even further north, it's easy to look at Schertz and say warehouses, but when you look at the area surrounding out there, well, I think where Garden Ridge is bordering us to the west there, and it's, for whatever reason, we've seen very little activity there in terms of P&Z. They, here we've done a few rezoning actions along the interstate, but we haven't had anybody come to us and ask for anything in 3A. It's, as you go along 482, you see here and there a light industrial. There's an asphalt plant. No, that's back on 22. That's on Old Nacogdoches. That's probably on the northern border of Area 4. But because I think a lot of this is still our ETJ, it's not our city limits. So
Yeah, it's just outside.
it's like the asphalt plant. A lot of people came to city council and said, kill it. TJ, it wasn't in the city. Nothing we could do about it. And that's part of the problem with trying to plan for the future. We don't control this right now.
Right.
And as far as 3B, I kind of think it's, well, I know you want to talk. That whole area up there, I think, so much of it is that light green, but I think especially south of 35, it's probably should be more yellow than, I think north maybe we take a little different look at. Maybe there's a mix of something that can go up there. Someone mentioned apartment complexes. We did rezone a piece of property right there by one of the schools, an apartment complex schooling in there north of 35. But that'll be interesting to see come up with.
And I think the widening of Nacogdoches stuff is going to definitely impact that 3A area. Because once your traffic can flow better out to 1604 and get to the major thoroughfares, I think that's going to blow up.
Again, part of the problem I see, and I've said this before, is so many of our thoroughfares are owned by the state. 3009, 78, 482, 2252, 1103, 1518. So, you know, we can plan whatever we like in terms of development, but the state's not willing to step up, or someone's not willing to step up and provide the infrastructure, the roadway infrastructure. Yeah.
And this is what this process will help in updating the land uses as well. It'll give you something to, you know, bring to TxDOT or, you know, to have those conversations and hopefully help influence what you all feel that you need in terms of those various corridors, and, connections and circulation.
But I'll say that while I don't think we want to ignore northern Schertz, I think really the real hot spots right now are in southern Schertz. I think for whatever reason anyway, we'll see how it turns out.
All right. Any other comments on 3A or B? You know, one thing to consider also is, you know, park space as well, especially if you have a lot of residential and if we're going to entertain multifamily as well.
I love that idea. I think he said out earlier about the rail link. If that was a town center, that was a rail link in a park, because when are you going to use the park during the day? Nobody cares if it's loud at night. The train's coming through, right? There's only the birds and the squirrels are going to be mad if the train comes in. So that town center would be perfect and adjacent to a park. That way people could either park there, take the train in San Antonio or up to Austin or whatever it is. Just to throw that out.
All right. I'm going to move to the last area. We're going to keep the same map, but I'm going to kind of zoom in on area 4 there. You see it's there's a lot of your commercial retail areas as well, but then you have a little bit behind those land uses, you see that there is some open space there. And I think somebody mentioned earlier about the kind of industrial warehouses that, you know, that might be what some might, you know, anticipate or think should go there. But does this area lends itself to more commercial retail? Is this where we integrate some other land uses in this area, some compatible land uses that might work as well? And then of course we've been talking about the traffic and congestion, and so that's something else that we'll have to keep in mind in looking at some additional land uses. Any thoughts on 4? Does it continue to develop the way it is currently? Do we want to influence something a little different?
In the, excuse me, in our current comp plan, I think one of the comments that was made toward the end was we had enough manufacturing and warehouse areas set aside on the north side for the next 100 years. Things changed. We're 10, 15 years down the road, so I don't know if that's still true. But what I do know is Schertz is still growing. Cibolo is still growing. New Braunfels is up over 100,000 people now. They're still growing. And it's more expensive to build in the hill country than it is out towards this way where we're not in the hill country. And we don't have aquifer restrictions and all that other kind of stuff. So is manufacturing and light industrial the right mix for this area? I doubt it. I can see more commercial. more retail. And if there's room for industrial or light manufacturing, so be it. But I also see what's happening on the southern side will likely happen here. In the current comp plan, when we gauged the public, it was conserve the open space, conserve the green space, and so forth. Sadly, those people are going away. They're dying off. They're getting old. And the younger crowd doesn't want to mess with all this stuff. So if someone inherits 500 acres, then somebody with a big check comes along and offers them a nice price for it, the green space is gone. And it's happening on the south side. We heard several people come up in here and say, you know, I'm 80 years old. I can't farm anymore. I need a place to live. I need to sell my property to get money to buy my future. Same thing's going to happen up here. So it'd be nice to have green space, nice to have conservation areas and so forth. I don't think it's very realistic in a massive scale. And again, as long as encroachment comes from the north and we keep growing from the south, we're going to need to see something different up here. A mix of housing, mix of retail, light industry, warehousing, and so forth.
And it doesn't hurt for us to also attempt to try to, you know, preserve some open space, because while people enjoy it, they, you know,
we can have some of it. I just don't see as
Right.
much as we have right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot of floodway in this area too.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I noticed looking at your map, where outlined an area that's, you know, what I would call northern Schertz, but as you come back down the interstate, there's still a lot of open space there. That gold area with the with kind of the tan insert, that what is it called, mixed use core, that's where the rail station was. That whole area there, that's where the rail station was going to go and the development around it. So hopefully, you know, we're not just looking at inside your dashed boxes, looking at the whole area, because the challenge up there would be, because you've got that sandwich between two industrial areas. So what do you put in there? I think if you went up there and looked today, you'd find little small commercial things going on up here. And the other issue about that particular area is access, because you'll notice the heavy black line, I assume the shaded line is our city limits. Well, 2252 is outside of those. That's Garden Ridge. So anything we want to do in this area, how are we going to access it? Only access it from our side, or are we someone going to be able to, or are we going to be able to access 2252 as well? But that's somebody else's jurisdiction. Something to keep in mind.
Any other thoughts, comments? Yeah, like, so as I mentioned earlier, when we come back next time, we'll have some more information to be able to present to you, some analysis. Our team and partner working on economic development has been running some analysis as well, and so that'll also give us some indication of you know, what is the, you know, the current market, and what are they looking for. You know, how much land do they need in terms of whatever development that might come that way, and so we'll dive in a little bit deeper. But before I move to the last slide, any final comments, questions, comments, anything that we need to keep in mind? I guess I have a question for you. What, in your mind, what makes this comprehensive plan update successful for you all, particularly in doing your job?
So, so I would just say, for me, I think the plan aligning with vision for the city. We want Schertz to be, a destination in some areas that are offered up, or just a place where people pass through. But I think that ultimately the update to the comprehensive plan should show what the vision is for Schertz going forward. I know we've spoken to a lot of residents that have come and talked about, rezoning. Developers have brought forth, for instance, to build multifamily in certain areas. And I've heard many people say that we moved to Schertz for a reason, we don't want it to change. That is probably not realistic, but I think that any plan should be able to communicate to those individuals as well that Schertz is changing, here's how it's changing, and here's how it's going to be or could be beneficial for all the citizens that live here and for those that we want to attract.
I think a good measure of success on this would be participation. I think we'll certainly get the folks that are directly concerned. In other words, I think we'll see a lot of participation from the stakeholders in Southern Schertz. I live in what I call Central Schertz, it's up on the hill here. How much are they going to be concerned? I don't know, but I think a good measurement of success will be how much participation you get.
I'm sure you'll get a lot of participation when you talk transportation and moving around the city.
Certain things that get people talking.
Sorry, sir. Go ahead. To answer your question about success, what does it look like? I'm glad I went last because I was able to think about it a little bit more. But when young people stay, play, spend, and grow, at the end of the day, nobody likes to drive. Right? So if I can stay here and I can have fun, I want to stay here because I love the community. I want to spend my money at the local stores. I want to eat at the local restaurants. I want to stay here. Nobody likes driving 35. Nobody likes being on I-10. And the only reason we do that is because what we're looking for isn't here. And so there has to be a balance of all of those things where people want to stay, want to play, and want to spend.
And that's a great point, right? So, but it doesn't necessarily align with what some of the older people been here and have invested in the community see. They might just want to be left alone, right? So I think that ultimately the plan needs to be able to communicate that, that vision of Schertz going forward.
And one other thing we'll talk about a little bit more next time also is downtown. It's not a key focus area we have on here, but we do know that it's important and it's been garnering a lot of attention lately. And so we want to make sure that we do address that as well. All right, so in terms of next steps, I talked about the stakeholder meetings that we'll have in June. That'll be also the time that we come back. I don't know what's happened to that font there in the last bullet, but that'll be also the time that we come back for the second meeting with you all and kind of dive into the weeds a little bit more. As I mentioned, we'll be having a community survey. One cool thing about this community survey, they'll have some questions in there, but there's a interactive tool, map tool in there, where we'll be able to separate these areas. And people love dropping pins and leaving comments, and so we'll be able to get a lot of ideas and comments from that tool, and so that'll be a way to get a lot of engagement as well. When that does go out, we'll want you to encourage that to people in the community, and it'll have a landing page on the city's website and things of that nature. So that'll be launching next month as well.
Sir, will that be in our Schertz magazine as well, advertised in there? I know a lot of people actually read
Can be,
that,
yeah.
so make sure that.
Yeah, we encourage whatever outlets you have, anything. We encourage you to drop those in there. We provide the content, wording, whatever you need, and yeah, that'd be a great idea to get that out.
All right, the concern I've been sitting on is the fact that I don't see any city council participate in this process until the end. And that concerns me a little bit. It hasn't worked real well for the Planning and Zoning Commission, where we thought we were in tune with them, and turns out we aren't. I guess the difference would be this, again, hopefully will be a community consensus document going to them. And I assume that I'm sure they'll be at stakeholder meetings, things like that, but I am a little concerned that they really we don't get any, we're not getting any, you want guidance from us. I'd like to have some guidance from the folks above us.
Yeah, we'll definitely engage them.
Okay.
It's kind of a recipe for disaster if you wait to the end to bring something. So we'll definitely engage them before that.
All right. Anyone else?
It probably would have been nice to have a joint meeting here when we were brainstorming so that we could hear what their ideas would be.
And we could talk to staff. I mean, like I mentioned, that next meeting is where we want to kind of roll up some sleeves. So, if we think that's a good opportunity to have a joint meeting,
I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea, but I think that would need to be a dedicated meeting,
Yes.
not trying to combine a NZ and a joint or a council. I think because they all have their input. Anyway,
Yeah.
it might be something we can look at doing.
And we've conducted those before. Actually, the one I'm thinking about was P&Z Council and the Economic Development Corporation. So it was all three groups.
There you go. Good input from the ED folks.
And we are working with the ED, as I mentioned earlier. Catalyst Commercials is on our team, have been engaging with ED, and have sent them information, getting their input as well. So we do have them engaged in the process.
Are we, between you and staff, are we planning like the charrette type events we did for the previous one? No? What type of community involvement are we going to do this time?
I mentioned earlier, because this comp plan update isn't the typical one where you look at every area of the city, since we are focusing on those areas. We thought it was probably a good idea to engage the community once we have some preliminary recommendations for those areas. Again, we're getting their input up front through the survey, so we'll know and hear their thoughts and their ideas, and then when we get to the recommendations or the draft recommendations, if you will, I think that'll be a good point to engage them, just to make sure that we heard them correctly and that we're aligning with the community's vision. And that'll give us time after that to make any adjustments, things that we might need to do. So
In
that,
the July, August timeframe,
I think
the
that's,
community
yeah,
event?
I think that's the August timeframe, yes.
Is there any thought to presentation to HOA directors and stuff like that? Get their idea, because sometimes HOAs can encourage folks to get involved with the surveys and that type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the intent of the focus groups is for you all to help us to identify any of those groups that we need to meet with. And so if there's I don't know if there's a HOA association or if they're all kind of individual, but if we want to engage them, that'd be the time
Yeah,
to do
I
so.
think the city has a pretty good list of HOAs. I attended one meeting because I sit on an HOA board where they were explaining, you know, what the city was doing, and that seemed to be received pretty well.
As much transparency through this process, the better at the end of the day. Helps with the consensus building.
All right.
If there's nothing else, I
Looks like we're
appreciate
done.
your time this evening, and
Okay.
hope you enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, sir. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Come up with. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Okay, item 4B is a workshop on this new electronic voting system. You want to say something?
I do.
Okay.
So just to kind of kick it off, so at the last meeting, Chairman Outlaw mentioned bringing this as a workshop discussion at our next meeting. We wanted to do it before you take any action on the items for tonight. And I'll leave it up to you, Chairman Outlaw. I can give you kind of what thoughts, staffs, and opinions are before y'all have y'all's discussion, or if you want to have your kind of group discussion first, and then I'll give you staff's recommendation.
Yeah, let me kick it off a little bit, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well. So I asked for this to be placed on the agenda after we closed the last meeting based on a comment from Commissioner Evans. His concern was there was one vote we took where we never saw, you know how when we vote and it pops up on the screen and shows how everybody voted. There was one issue we voted on that we never saw that screen. IT assured me that it was there. People streaming saw it. So Ernie was, his suggestion was he likes the voice vote. And there you see this is the display that pops up, and you'll see my name's not even on there. I'm that commissioner at the bottom. I think my suggestion, and then we'll see what staff wants to chime in here. My suggestion would be that we combine the two, that we go back, go back to the procedure where the motion is made and seconded, and I call for the vote, and we do it the same way. We start down on my left and come back, skip over, and come back. But as you vote yea or nay, you would indicate your vote on the machine. And I think that would accomplish a couple of things. First of all, anybody in the audience or watching the video knows how I voted. They either heard me say yay or they heard me say no. They don't have to look at the screen and say, okay, who is, and try to correlate what they're seeing machine see up here. But again, I wanted this to be a discussion, what the rest of you feel about that. Want to talk about it? You want to hear what staff has to say? Yeah, come on up here. Let's hear your thoughts.
Can I say something before? I think technology is supposed to make our lives easier. And so them putting these machines in should make our lives easier. What you should do is just call for a vote. Commissioners vote now. Everybody puts in their votes, done. It's recorded electronically, correct? It's displayed on the screen, correct? It has our names, correct? So then us going around and saying yes is just double voting for no reason. It's a double.
Well, other than, let's hear what staff has to
Okay,
say.
go ahead.
So I would say staff's recommendation is kind of echoing Commissioner Carbone, to use the system that has been purchased and is put in place, very similar to the way that City Council is utilizing it. So kind of twofold. One thing, there's no question, you're hitting the yes, you're hitting the no. Once it's recorded, it gets displayed on the screen by IT. We can verify and make sure that before it goes off of the screens, all of you can see it on yours. We can make sure all that happens. And then the second piece to that is you're truly voting on what your opinion of the item is. You're not waiting to hear what your fellow commissioner might say, if they vote yes or they vote no, and change your decision, or being the holdout that everyone voted yes, but you know it's going to go through, so I'm going to vote no anyway. So by doing it anonymously, not anonymously, but using the technology system, you're voting truly on what your thought and opinion on the case or the item is versus what the person next to you voted on it. So our recommendation would be to use the system very much the way that City Council is using it, and not use a verbal vote, but just use the electronic system.
Well, again, I did not, I didn't want to dictate. So that's why it's up for discussion tonight. So what do the rest of you think? What do the rest of you want to do?
I think push the button and you don't have to speak. We spent the money, do it.
I think what she's trying to get away from is groupthink. Groupthink is dangerous. In a democratic society, your vote is yours. And so at the end of the day, when you ask us to vote, we should just press the button that we feel our convictions tell us to do so. She's right. When people get nervous, there's a big crowd, they want to just get this over with, and sometimes they just go along with the crowd. I've kind of felt that in some of the meetings that we've had, and I think that's wrong, and it does a disservice to the reason we're sitting up here. If you don't have the courage to vote your own conviction, you shouldn't be sitting up here, period.
And again, nobody sees other than I see it, but it's not published until everybody votes, correct?
That's correct.
What do you think, Richard?
Use the machine as it's designed.
Yeah, so I think we should use the machine as it's designed too, but I would certainly caution against speculating, or questioning people's voting rationale. So, but purchase the system. Everyone has the ability to press yes or no. So.
Okay. All righty. Well, it sounds like we will just use the electronic vote the way it's intended. And I'll just ask one more thing. You've got that request to speak button, especially when it gets busy. When we started out, wasn't a whole lot of discussion going, so it wasn't that hard. But if you push that button, and I know, yes, got something flashes here, and what it does is it puts a red dot here by your name on my little screen, so I know you have something that you want to say. And that way, if there's 2 or 3 of you, I can make sure we don't overlook somebody. So,
Yeah. I think we need to use the equipment was bought for us.
okay, so everybody's good with just voting electronically, correct? That's the consensus. That's what we'll do.
Ernie may not have seen the screen because he looked away somewhere.
There was a voting screen. Can we put that back up?
Okay.
That's all right.
Do you want
Yeah,
to see?
this one, exactly. I think when you call for the vote, this needs to be up so we can see it. So, because I got to be honest with you, these buttons don't really give you that feedback like an iPhone does that you know you hit it. So there's no light that comes on, there's no feel to it. It's just, so,
I think this comes up after all the votes are placed, right?
Yes.
Well, part of it, again, one of the things Emily mentioned was the not really knowing how each other votes. So it doesn't influence you to go one way or the other.
that's true.
And now, because, John, one of the things is I will see it here. Okay, it displays on my little screen real time. So if I see that I don't see a vote from you, I will certainly ask. Okay. But again, we can do this however you guys want to do it. Sure.
Hi, Oscar from Schertz IT. Just so you know, there is a light on the far left of the button that will show you yes or no.
Go ahead.
So that might help you kind of make sure that you do press the right button, yes, no, or request to speak.
Yeah, it's not real bright. It's that little faint. Okay?
It's almost like the red button on the microphones. You can barely see it for some of us mature people.
Yeah. All right, are we good to move on? I was just saying, okay? All right, item number 5 is the consent agenda. There's a single item on that tonight, the minutes from the May 10th, 2023 regular meeting. Do we need to pull those off consent for discussion? If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion to approve the minutes?
That was Commissioner Ray.
I second.
Second was, okay. We need to find a way to do that. Not always trying to hear. Okay. So we have a motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Ray and a second from Commissioner Hector, correct? Okay, and there's no discussion on consent agenda, so I will call for the vote. Please record your vote. Why isn't mine sticking? All right. So we have 5 votes cast. Do you want to publish that? And we have 5 ayes and none opposed, so that motion passes. Thank you. Now, you going to clear that or should I do it? However, yeah, all right. Item number 6, public hearing. We have 2 public hearings this evening. Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The Commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the Commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to City Council if necessary. So item 6A is PLUDC 2023-0133. Hold a public hearing, workshop, and discussion and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 8, Section 21.8.4, home occupations.
Evening, Commissioners. PLUDC 2023-0133, amendments to Article 8 of the UDC's Section 21.8.4, home occupations. Samuel Haas, Senior Planner. Can y'all see my screen? Okay. So just to give you a little background, there are numerous home occupations within the city. There are many people that come in and try to be responsible and do their due diligence, and we have found that our occupations are a little more strict, a little inflexible, and so the development subcommittee have had, to my understanding, they've had numerous discussions. They wish to further clarify what is a home occupation, maybe make it a little more flexible for people to do that with the nature of how work has changed in the last several years. And so the staff has done some research. We looked at 8 other municipalities, and we looked at their home occupation regulations, and we drafted some amendments to that section of our UDC based off of these 3 things. So this table here before you, similar to what was in the staff report, basically there is, we have on the left existing and on the right what is proposed. So we're adding language permitting home occupation as an accessory use, currently as it is as a primary use. So the current existing code, the area set aside for home occupations has a limit of 20% of the total floor area of just the residence. The proposed changes, we are upping that to 30%, and we are actually allowing for accessory structures to be counted in the floor area as well. But that does have a limitation of 600 square feet, so we do have a cap on that sort of space. Currently, retail sales are prohibited. You cannot go up to a home occupation and buy something, but we're now allowing retail sales to be on the premises as long as the item is produced in conformance with code. So there are still restrictions to that, but essentially in a narrow sense, you can go and purchase things at a home occupation. We've added language clarifying that a home occupation business must have a permanent resident of the home involved, so they have to live there. We have added language stating that only one home occupation business related vehicle is permitted. That way there's not a ton of trucks and vans parked outside of the home. Currently within the code, the home occupation, as I mentioned earlier, must be within the principal structure, but we're now allowing accessory buildings to be to allow for that home occupation. There's language clarifying that no exterior storage or display may occur. We've made that explicit. There's language clarifying that a home occupation is an accessory use only. We've made that explicit as well. And we've also provided a list of home occupation uses, also a list of prohibited uses, and then we've added some language at the end that said basically anything that we haven't addressed is prohibited until we further amend the UDC. So the proposed permitted uses, this is kind of a working list here. We've got office facility, author, artisan, sculptor, dressmaker, music teacher, tutoring, etc. You can kind of go down the list here. Food preparation, and there is more clarification in the actual amendments and the red lines. I mean, this is just kind of the bullet points here, but a lot of these do have restrictions on them, and providing that XYZ is occurring, will allow this. Providing that XYZ is occurring, will allow this. So, if you have those red lines, it kind of does go into further detail about that. And the prohibited uses, so here are some of the bullet points on those as well. No animal hospitals, no restaurants, no automobile repair, no commercial cleaning, no mortuaries, no repair shops, things like that. And then again, so if it's not mentioned, if we don't explicitly state, this is permitted, you are prohibited from having that as a home occupation. So obviously, the amendments would provide added clarity and flexibility home occupations. Therefore, staff does recommend approval to the amendments of the Unified Development Code as proposed and discussed. However, we can further discuss this, and if you have the commission has any sort of recommendations, we can always present those to council. We could take this back and we can work on it for another time, etc. So.
All right, this is a public hearing. It is now 6:49 p.m. and I'll open it for public comment. And there's the stampede to the, all right. No, I don't see anyone. And did anyone send in any comments or anything? All right. Close it at 6:49 PM. All right, commissioners. Again, if you do me a favor and push your little RTS button, and we'll get going. All right, Commissioner Hector, go ahead.
Sir, so what's the process of making recommendations to add to the list of either permitted or prohibited uses?
Yeah, so, you know, we could say, all right, this needs some work. We could table this for another P&Z meeting. We can go back. We could work through some things. Or if y'all are comfortable with what we have now and you want to add a few more uses or something, and we could send that off to council and, you know, get that process going. So I would suppose that, unless you want to.
I was just going to clarify. Commissioner Hector, are you asking for if you want to add more uses to the list right now, or if I'm a resident a year from now and I want to do a home occupation that's not on this list, how would I go about getting that changed?
Yes, the latter. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Well, then we would have to amend the UDC again to add uses. So anything that's not currently here right now, and let's say this goes down the line, it gets approved by city council, and, you know, a year or two down the road, we want to add something, we would just come back and we would add an amendment to the UDC section 2184 to say this use we think should be allowed now.
Okay, and how's that request made? So is there a process already in place, or do we have to create a new process?
So actually, right now, in the Unified Development Code, anybody is able to make a request for a UDC amendment. So they would actually do that process through CityView. It's a pretty simple process. They provide that kind of application through CityView and then provide justifications of why they feel that you know, land use should be included. We would run the traps on it, and if we would support it, or, you know, vice versa, it would come like this UDC amendment tonight to you guys.
Okay, thank you. So there wouldn't be a need for a new process. Got it.
Commissioner Carbone?
The only thing I didn't see on there was a tattoo artist.
Is that something that you?
Yeah, you can
think
do it
should
in
be?
your own house. You can have your own studio. If you can do your nails and hair and all kinds of other things that you add on there, why can't someone do that?
Okay.
Commissioner Ray?
So we're going to offer all these things up, and then what's the control on them? I mean, are we going to go out and inspect these places, or are we just going to let them do their thing?
I mean, they would still have to, there'd still be code requirements, and yeah, to my understanding, neighborhood services would go out and make sure that, you know, if you're serving food, that everything's clean and, you know, things like that, so.
So, oddly enough, on food, state law sort of trumps. So the cottage, part of how we ended up with what we did, particularly for allowing customers to come to the house now, is because the state's cottage food industry law cuts the city out of it to a large degree and allows folks to do this in their homes. So just as a clarification, on those industries where the city would have a role to inspect, we would. That is being more and more limited. So the cottage food industry and then some of the bills pending. But to your question, this is a fundamental kind of issue we have with regard to whether it's a home occupation or there's not a home occupation going on. It's the city being able to actually prove a violation of the code. So part of what we talked through on this is, let's not kind of kid ourselves that, you know, we can enforce things we can't enforce. You know, there are a lot of great ideas. We'll put in that they can't do this and you can't do that. And the reality is, if somebody's doing something, tattoos at 11 at night, who from the city is going to come out at 11 at night and check and see if they're doing something they should or shouldn't do? And so that is a fundamental kind of issue, and that is a concern that the subcommittee talked about is, you know, how do we really enforce it, and what are people's expectations? And so, yeah, particularly with home occupation and neighborhood services and planning, it's a challenge, because unless I can demonstrate you're doing something you're not, I can't cite you.
So I guess my next question is, with the House bill coming down, it's going to restrict the cities from being stricter, I guess, than the state? Is that going to impact this type of stuff?
Yeah, so there could be some areas where it would. You know, I think what I would say is if that state law passes for those areas that they license and regulate, it is what it is. It doesn't really kind of matter. But we see this as fundamentally a sort of a separate thing with regard to a lot of these areas. I mean, I think what sort of came about is, for example, a lot of this discussion was frankly prompted by a situation that occurred over the course of COVID where a person started doing pet grooming at their house and wanted to keep doing it. And that kind of led us to sort of revisit it. And here's sort of the fundamental discussion that we had that maybe you're getting to. If you envision this where maybe once every couple days somebody comes over and they park in front of the house and they bring their little, you know, I don't know, what kind of dog do you have, Commissioner Outlaw? What kind of dog might that be that you would get groomed? A poodle.
Yeah.
All right, you've got some sort of poodle. You bring it in, it gets groomed for a half hour or whatever, the person takes it, leaves, and goes. You think, no big deal, right? That works pretty fine. But if what you get instead is somebody who's doing bang-up business and 7 or 8 people are coming in the morning, they're dropping off their dogs as they go to work because it's a service day off, is you leave it there and they'll groom it. The dogs are running around the backyard all day going nuts. It's a bit of a different thing. That's the challenge on some of this stuff is in many cases you can envision it where it works out perfectly fine. People are doing stuff probably in your neighborhood that you know about that, oh yeah, so-and-so does that, it's all perfectly fine. But then you also have the neighbor that's the not good neighbor that's doing stuff that's driving everybody nuts. That's the challenge with this thing. And I think the real thing is how much do we restrict folks who are trying to do it the right way, who call up and say, can I do this? And we go, nope, technically you can't, because of those people. And so the idea was loosen it up a bit. It's not to say, and we talked about this, not say that 9 months from now we won't have some neighbor call and complain, but that's the real challenge, because it's really hard for us to go through and enforce all of these with regard to what those standards are. You know, but there were a couple of things that, you know, that we talked about. So the provision that not more than one business-related commercial vehicle shall be present at one time, that's a tough one to enforce, right? The neighbor calls up, by the time staff gets out there, the guy's left. No, we didn't see 2 of them. They're not marked, or they marked, that kind of thing. So we try to put the rules in, but it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. There's a long one.
Commissioner Carbone, did you? Okay. Commissioner Bro?
Thank you. Can I go item by item on here? Okay. In the 30% gross area, are we counting, like, for example, the house, the garage, the patio, the shed, but not the grassy yard part of the house? It's
Yeah, I believe that's correct, right?
Basically stuff with a floor on it.
And, yeah, and like the floor, the enclosed area, I suppose.
Okay. Enclosed area? Not
I mean,
a patio?
Yeah. Yeah.
Enclosed area.
Enclosed area, yeah.
Does it say that? Maybe it should say that.
Okay.
Maybe we should be specific. I'm not sure what number 3 means. Maybe if you, I guess where I'm hitting a bump is where it says for mechanical equipment for hobby purposes. So I can't bring anything into my business that I would not normally use in the occupation of my house, either occupation or for hobby purposes. I can't bring a forge into my house,
Correct.
for example.
As it reads right now, yes.
Okay. Let's see. Number 14, or B14, I think it should be 13, but when you say said incidental use, does that mean everything up above, or what are we talking about when it says said incidental use shall never be permitted as a principal use but only as an accessory use. I think I know what it says.
Right.
But the beginning is throwing me off. What is
Yeah,
it?
as in the principal use being a residence and the accessory use being the home occupation. Yeah.
Okay. I've got some more. So let's see, I have to read this myself. Number 8, no, C8. An office facility of a salesman, sales, or manufacturer's rep, provided that no retail or wholesale transactions or provision of services are personally and physically made on the premises. So if I'm selling curtains in my house, and I bring somebody to my house, and we decide on a contract and a sale, does that say I can't sign the sale right there, or can I sign the sale?
They can't come and buy the curtains from your house unless you make them there.
Unless I make it in the house?
Right. You could sell it and then it could be mailed to them from a third party or something. But as that reads, it would say, you know, for the curtain example, the only way you could sell it there is if you made the curtains yourself right then and there.
So if I have a business like that, I have to make a point to have it delivered someplace else, not to my house.
If that was the curtain example is what you're using.
Yeah, it
but
could be anything, but
True.
curtains. Okay. All right. The family home thing, number 11, family homes, did the state implement that? Is that a state law that says we can't prohibit family homes and?
I am not sure. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And neither can HOAs. HOAs can't prevent that either.
Right.
Item D4. Okay, if I'm running a business, I'm selling my curtains, I can't have more than 2 garage sales per year. Does that include the HOA garage sale, or can a HOA have 2 garage sales? And I can have 2, so that's 4. It would
Okay.
make sense. Okay, do we need to reference that? Or somebody else is gonna ask.
So, yeah, okay.
Somebody else will ask it. And then E, I guess if appeals come to P and Z, we'll have to entertain if we need new procedures, or do we just conduct it as normal business? Somebody comes, presents a case, and we do yay or nay?
I would assume that it would be just, we would treat it as normal business. So it's going to, yeah.
Hey, I appreciate the work y'all did. This is definitely needed for our code, and appreciate the work that y'all did, and I hope the 8 examples were good examples, and I think it's a good start.
Anyone else? Well, my concerns, I think the primary, we're talking about traffic and noise. And I think as Mr. James pointed out, and we've talked about it before, we have ordinances in place that regulate noise and to some extent parking. Where we were talking about pit pads and things, the general thought was we could handle those kinds of complaints with those ordinances. And then, from the fire marshal's perspective, my concern of a home business was always the visitors. Because, a commercial business, there are different fire codes from a single-family residence. Usually where I would run into those is with home daycare and even group homes. But I think you've you've addressed that pretty good by saying no more than one customer at a time. And I was going to ask you, tattoo parlors today, do you know where there are permitted use? I don't have the table with me. Have any idea where they're allowed?
I believe it's M1 and M2.
Okay.
They're not allowed even to request a specific use permit in any of the other zoning districts.
And I guess the difference would be, again, one customer, no more than, but, you know, again, the enforcement issue. But, and my only, so I'm not sure that's a big thought. I am a little, I'd like to see if we couldn't find a solution, because as I mentioned yesterday, anytime you come up with a list and you're trying to be an all-inclusive list, you're gonna miss something. And it would be nice if there was a way for somebody, in the example I brought up yesterday was, my wife goes to see a massage therapist every other week. Well, she works out of her home. And I don't see that on the list anywhere. Well, we could add it, but it's just an example of, right now, whatever list we come up with, if something's not there and somebody wants to do it, now we got to go through this whole process of amending the UDC. It would just be nice if maybe we could come up with, you know, I don't know. If there was some way to come up with broad categories rather than specific things.
Right.
Maybe somebody wants to do, maybe they're a physical therapist, they want to do that at their house. Where do we have to specifically say physical therapy, or could we find some kind of, could that be a office professional, something like that? I'm just, you know, the idea of having to amend the UDC just got something. Does anybody else have anything? Because we actually have three options this evening. And this is a recommendation to City Council. It's on here as possible action. Don't have to take any action. But we can approve it, or we can recommend approval, we can recommend denial. I wrote table, but looking in the rules, the actual term is postpone. Someone could make a motion to postpone this, or we could just through consensus ask staff to take our comments and mull them over and come back to us again. Commissioner Bro made several recommendations, and I saw Sam write them down. You know, we could recommend approval with the changes, but you know, I think I'd feel more comfortable allowing them to make those changes and come back to us. But anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. Those are your options. What's the, does someone want to make a motion, or just do we just want to, through consensus, ask them to reconsider and come back? Mr. Carbone?
Sir, I like your idea. I think they got a lot out of this meeting. I think they can do it better. We can all do better. And I think, like the commissioner to my right said, it's the first good step. And there's some stuff on here that even when he was talking, I was like psychiatry, a therapist, all kinds of things that people do in their own home. And maybe a better way of outlining how someone adds a occupation to be quickly added to the list instead of going through the whole bureaucratic process of updating the UDC, maybe making it broad sweeping as far as like office type worker. I think you're picking up what I'm down.
Mm-hmm.
So then, do we want to take no action this evening and just have staff come back to us at a future date? Is that a consensus? Okay, I think so. All right, so As a group, we're not going to take any action on this tonight, and I think it's a good start, and it'd be interesting to see what you guys bring back to us. Thank you. Okay, 6B is another public hearing, PLUDC 2023-0134. Hold a public hearing
Chairman,
workshop.
Mr. Chairman, is my light blinking?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
We're asking for staff to come back to us, or those of us on the commission that have suggestions for editing. Are we going to provide those to them, or just let them come back and hope they incorporate what we desire?
I mean, the tattoo parlor, the massage therapist, that's pretty simple. I think your recommendations there, I mean, we could incorporate those. I mean, and I think the language that Mr. Outlaw in making it more flexible to add uses, I think we're gonna have to work on that a little bit. So I think if you'd like to, send me an email or something and, recapping everything, that'd be great. Otherwise, I think we got pretty much.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to prevent is that I think we need this. I'd hate to draw it out. But I would suggest if any commissioners have ideas to send them to our planning staff and let them incorporate it. And so that when they come back, we don't have another laundry list of, well, you should have added this. And I'd also like to caution, I don't know anything about what type of medical stuff I can do in my home. Where are we going to cross the bounds if we say you can do physical therapy, or you can pull teeth, or you can do something else? Because a dentist doesn't need an office much bigger than a bathroom. So where do we go? What do we put in there before it crosses a line that says, you can't do that in your house? So, let's just be careful on what we submit and how general it is, because the list will never end. we can add stuff forever. I think we need to start and come up with a document and let it go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. 6B, LUDC 2023-0134, hold a public hearing, workshop, and discussion, and again, possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, Article 5, Section 21.8.5, permitted use table, Article 16, definition. Ma'am?
PLUDC 2023-0134, amendments to Article 5, Section 21.5.8, permitted use table, and Article 16 definitions. Samuel Haas, Senior Planner. Okay, a little background on this. We've had some interest of late in the city of Schertz for energy-based land uses, specifically solar and battery/storage. We've done a little bit of research in the area. We've looked at some municipalities, and they've got language in their unified development codes with these sort of things in mind. And so that is sort of what is sparking this UDC amendment. So I'll start with definitions. We're adding two definitions. So when the staff report was made, we essentially sent out two definitions for you guys to look at. And since then, staff has kind of looked things over, and we think that we could add a little more clarity and perhaps maybe even one more permitted use to really sort of to address the concerns of a specific project that's kind of floating around right now. So the ones that we sent you was the solar energy and the solar photovoltaic facility. Basically, we wanted to define solar energy. We wanted to define what a solar photovoltaic facility was. A structure, assembly, equipment, or any combination thereof relating to the generation, transportation, and storage of solar energy. And then we decided that we want to also just to cover our bases, we thought that we wanted to include this language that said pertains to standalone facilities and not solar equipment that is added to residential structures, right? So we don't want to cause any confusion to people who are putting solar panels on their homes for those kind of residential purposes, right? And so we also, the project that was in mind, we had some conversations with them, and they basically came back and said, oh, We can't guarantee 100% that all the energy that is going to be coming from this project is going to be stored from solar energy. So we thought of adding this one little line in here that says a facility or installation whose primary function is to store or produce electrical energy regardless of source. Basically kind of like a battery sort of area, like large batteries. We thought that including that would sort of assuage the concerns that this one sort of project has, right? We wanted to leave in the other stuff, thought it was still good, just in case of that comes along in the future. But for this specific project in mind, we are going with the power storage system. We're adding that to it. So we're adding those to Article 16 so we can define those. So then the permitted use table, what everybody looks at, what everybody utilizes, correct? So we're adding basically 2 uses to 2 different districts. So we think that the solar photovoltaic facilities and the powered storage system, we think that those would be appropriate in M1 and M2. So we're gonna let those be permitted by right. And we think that both of those sort of land uses have less adverse impacts on surrounding properties as other forms of energy land uses. So we think that M1 and M2 is appropriate. And with the additional language and items that we added for increased clarity, staff is recommending approval of the amendments to the Unified Development Code with the additional items as proposed and discussed. Are there any comments or questions?
All right, thank you, Sam. Well, this is a public hearing. Open the public comment at 7:16. Doesn't look like anyone has come in, but he wants to, okay, close it at 7:16. All right, commissioners, anybody, any questions or comments? Commissioner Bro?
Did staff consider public use areas for something like this?
We did not know.
Would you entertain that? And I'm specifically thinking of CCMA. They've got several hundred acres of wide open space that one day could possibly be used for something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe include public spaces in addition.
Would you be open to maybe a specific use permit for such?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It'd be better for permitted use, but if you want to go specific use, we can.
Well, that's how we define it in the table.
I did want to ask, and I realize it's not your area of expertise, but I've been out of the game for a while now. Are these kinds of things, are they defined and regulated, or are there building codes that cover this stuff?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Commissioners, so again, this is a recommendation to City Council. We can approve it, recommend approval, denial, or once again, we can postpone. So in response to Commissioner Bro, what you would do is add these uses as a special use permit in, was it public?
Yeah, PUB districts, public, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we could, if we want to kick this up, someone could make a motion to recommend approval with that change.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir?
I move that we recommend approval of PLUDC 2023-0134 related to the permitted use table with the addition of adding the PUB, what is it?
Yeah, the specific use permit with
The PUB with a specific use permit to the table that was presented by the staff.
Okay, I have a motion to recommend approval with the SUP provision from Commissioner Bro. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ray. We have a motion and a second to recommend approval with the SUP. Any further comments or questions, discussion? Okay, please record your votes. Okay, I have five votes. Publish that. That is 5 ayes, unopposed, so that motion passes. Yeah, item 7, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Thing? Announcements by commissioners.
Sure. On the 20th, I believe, it's Memorial Day. VFW is going to be having a ceremony here at 9 a.m. I'd like to attend for VFW Post 8315.
And I'm sorry, John, what was that? On the,
It's a Memorial Day celebration here at our flagpole here on Schertz Parkway.
okay,
here.
down the Veterans Memorial,
Yes, sir, at 0900 on Monday.
9 a.m. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
Good morning. Yes, sir.
City staff? All right. Item number 8 is information, additional information in your packets regarding items that have gone to City Council and their status. Item number 9, there being no further business. It is now 7:21 and this meeting's adjourned.